What's that?
So, Elena and Joyce aren't here tonight, so she's going to be making the announcement.
Oh, for those kids?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're ready? It's like,
I feel like you guys are the panel and I got to answer your questions.
ready? Good evening. Welcome to our meeting for tonight. We just finished an executive session, so let's start off with a pledge of allegiance. Quick announcements. Mr. Gilbert, Mr. Rajat, and Mrs. Miller couldn't attend due to some other commitments, but we have a quorum of 4, plus our student Rep. Grace Perna. Can I have a motion to adopt an agenda? Mrs. Hoffman, second. Mrs. Stevenson, all in favor? Okay. So let's start off with Board of Education comments. Grace, would you like to start off, please?
I hope everyone had a good Regents week and a good week. That's about it.
Okay. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes, so being in the midst of musical theater season, I wanted to give a shout out to our Chisago students who truly gave an entertaining rendition of Shrek, and Shada Khan's very heartwarming rendition of Mary Poppins. And I have to say that their fans, their faith or commitment or loyalty is unshakable. Both families and alumni came out and actually filled that auditorium and gym to the rims, and it was definitely worth the trip. So there's been a flurry of, actually before I mention committee activity, I just want to say that I also attended the Day of Dialogue, and also want to give a shout out and thank the principals, the high school East and West principals, specifically Mr. Agustinoni and Mrs. McMahon. The Day of Dialogue, it's very inspiring. Having attended this, I feel we need to go through this as the adults in the room. It's incredibly organized, thought out, thoughtful exercises that help broaden our awareness or their awareness to differences that hopefully will lead to positive change. It was truly inspiring. So what I'd like to share about the committees, there's only a few I'd like to give an update on for time's sake. Policy, we have a first and second reading. The first reading tonight is specific to academic philosophy, and it should be noted that the feedback that we received at our last meeting and also, 2 meetings back, and in between specific to the BYOD is included in the first reading tonight. Those changes are in there. The second reading is specific to financial policies, such as the purchasing policy, and so with our second reading, we're voting to approve those changes. And as always, we have a link at the bottom of our agenda so that people can review the schedule. Tomorrow's our Cultural Diversity Committee meeting. I'm looking forward to this. We're starting to feel the excitement as the planning really starts to solidify as we get ready for our 10th anniversary of Sensational. And as promised, I wanted to keep this brief, but I also would like to invite everyone, Dr. Robinson, the rest of the board, to attend the upcoming Region 7 Odyssey of the Mind tournament that's held at High School East. That's March 7th. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. DeLallo?
Excuse me. The only thing I wanted to comment on was the budget process, which is at state, which is underway. Apparently today was another, what they euphemistically called another tin cup day. Comes from the idea that somebody is begging, uses a tin cup for an offering or whatever. And there were a number of groups out there. Each and every one of them has a justifiable or a worthy cause. Obviously, the pie only is so big, and consequently, not everybody will be, well, no one will be as funded to the extent that they would like to be, but the degree to which they're funded is something else. I really don't expect that the governor's proposal of consolidating expense-based aid will float this year any more than it did last year. There are too many good reasons for keeping that. It is based on not a projected budget, but money that has already been spent. And over time, it would be punitive to school districts and their programs if they were to adopt that methodology. But as far as the aid, changing an aid, it does two things that I'm sure the governor would greatly like. One of them is that it allows the state to escape any liability for any deficiencies in past funding. There are billions of dollars owed to various school districts, or certainly the districts throughout the state, for underfunding under the formula and according to judicial findings. And consequently, if they can, and that's under the current aid formula, if they can abandon that formula and adopt something else, then of course they might be able to say, well, we don't owe that anymore. It does have some justification for it, because it does shift the idea, puts more emphasis on aid according to need. The big question in my mind is a practical one, having to do with how the state handles funding for Long Island. There's the formula, and then there's Long Island, and Long Island generally doesn't get any aid per se, because their wealth ratios are so far up there that they don't get it. So there has to be a means by which Long Island is sort of made whole. It's purely political. It's not according to formula or anything else. And I can't imagine, given the nature of government politics, that they're going to throw Long Island under the bus, because it has too much to do with which party controls the Senate. That's all I have.
Out of the respect of the beautiful faces staring at me, I'm going to save my comments to the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple things. In late January, I was at the high school, and I attended a session with Mr. Agostinoni on how we can improve Veterans Day 2020. This is an event we run. It's very ceremonial, but it crams a lot of students from second period social studies classes into the auditorium, and a lot of other students really don't get to experience it. He has some very good ideas on what he's seen at other schools, where it becomes more of an educational experience. We can line up veterans based on their experiences to participate in classes ahead of time, arrange that with certain teachers, and create a level of exposure where a lot of veterans have run nuclear power plants on ships. They have fixed planes and tanks. They've crossed the barriers on foreign languages when they train people from other countries. All of those could be brought forward into classes other than social studies. They could be brought into physics classes, they could be brought into shop classes, they could be brought into foreign language classes. And so I think there's an opportunity, I've talked to a couple people in the community, where we could have a very meaningful level of classroom engagement, and thus create more opportunities for students and teachers outside of just the social studies type arena. So some good thinking came forward. Still, it's early, which means there's a lot of promise, and as projects get closer to a deadline, sometimes things don't always appear, but I think it's a good set of ideas that we should look into. And he's got some great ideas based on his experience with other schools, where there is more involvement in a way that involves the students into the event. Second thing I want to bring forward is now it's budget season. Now it's looking very closely at where the money is, where it could be going, how we're going to position ourselves in the next few years. One item we brought up over the last couple of board meetings is the concept of restorative justice, and this came through the NYSBA convention. A lot of schools do this in a way that is customized to their specific needs. We're different from all the other school districts in New York, but we have a pretty good idea where some of our key needs are. One of the conversations that's come up forward is the need for social emotional learning and social emotional supports for our students. That would be a fertile ground to talk about potentially integrating some form of restorative justice into how we do business today. And the other way that things that have come forward are on the day of dialogue, high school students discussing some of their concerns as to where they think there are potential inequities or areas that we can get better. We've known throughout this year that there are some areas that we can get better, and I think this is the opportunity to figure out what are our needs, talking to our administrators, talking to the folks who work this on a regular basis in front of our students, and then once we determine our needs, figure out how we're going to service them. It doesn't mean we have to be like any other school district. It means we figure out how we service our specific needs for restorative justice. So something out there we will continue to look for and hopefully bring forward appropriate conversations as needed. That's it for me. Let's go to other public comments for students. And are you planning to come up?
You can sit here. You can sit.
Okay, before you do that, I'll have to read the standard language, that this is an opportunity for the public to address the board. If there are any residents in attendance, please come up and complete the comment form. The board will not address specific comments, but ask for name and address in the event follow-up is necessary. Remind residents that public comment is one item on a long agenda. Therefore, ask each speaker to be as succinct as possible. Remarks be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. We also expect residents to speak in a respectful, courteous manner and to model proper civility decorum for our students. The board will not allow disparaging, inflammatory, or accusational comments about anybody in the school or students during the public comments. Residents may also contact the board via email at bo@shenschools.org. I think we made that change, right?
Yes.
Okay, and all questions come to the Office of Public Information Officer and are shared with the board under Superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions and concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions and concerns typically addressed by the superintendent and our designee. So at this point, we'll turn over to you, Grace, to cover some of the other students.
On behalf of Elena and Joyce from Senate, there is actually no updates for the board at this time. So,
And do we have any other comments from residents? Normally, they line up over there. Anybody? If not, we do have time after the meeting, so at this point, we'll turn it over to Dr. Robinson for his superintendent's report.
Sure, actually, I'm looking for, Mrs. Carmen could fill in for me. As Mr. Presley was talking tonight, talking about social emotional learning, right now at the high school, at the girls' basketball game, is actually initially scheduled for Friday's game, but was canceled due to the weather. There's an initiative by I will say Dr. Coleman, just gave him a PhD, Mr. Coleman, who's our athletic director, and he has a student advisory council that's called Shen Goes Green. It's an initiative to raise awareness about mental health, and that mental health matters. And the logo on the back of the shirt is Shatter the Stigma. And so right now we probably have 300-400 kids in the high school gymnasium as the girls basketball team take on Saratoga, promoting that. And I share that because, as Mr. Presley pointed out, that when we think about social emotional learning and how do we support kids regardless of where they are, that's one of those things that we have to recognize, that we have to shatter the stigma of people asking for help. Because oftentimes people suffer in silence, and asking for help doesn't mean something wrong with you, just that we need help and support. And I can't think of a single person that in the course of their life have never asked for help, and quite frankly, I probably need help 3 or 4 or 5, 6 times a day, much less. And so I share that in jest, particularly for our young people to understand that while I share it in jest, it's a very serious issue, that if you need help, reach out to someone. If you're struggling with homework, you're struggling with friends, if you're struggling with whatever, reach out, because that notion of being silent and hoping things go away, it doesn't. Things only get worse. And so that's what the student athletes at the high school have been really, really pushing. And we're so happy when we see kids taking charge and using their voice to make a difference for themselves and their peers. And I'm particularly looking at our young folks here. You guys use your voices to take charge and help yourself and you help your peers. And so that's what's happening now at the high school tonight. So it's a tremendous tribute to our students to try to make a difference. Just 2 things related to Mr. DeLallo's comments. We do have the legislative sessions set. The dates are set on calendars, and hopefully all the board members, if not all the board members, can be in attendance at some of those sessions as we meet with our state legislative leaders on the 3rd of March. And also we have a school tour set on the 18th of March, and so hopefully it's a nice weather day. It's always scheduled, anything is March is always with your fingers crossed in terms of weather and impact. So those are the things that we have right now, and later on, once we get into information session, I'll come back on. But we certainly have some tenure recommendations here tonight, and looking forward to hearing from Mrs. Bush as well. So.
Okay. No, I'm sorry.
Good. No,
There,
good.
there was one thing, we were talking about the social and emotional education and so forth, and I came across an article in the paper last Sunday. Now, we're all aware of the fact that there's a higher incidence of suicide among people who are dealing with sexual identity and sexual preference issues. And what I saw was that there was also a greater incidence of using of opiates. And that was something I'd never thought of before. So when we're addressing these issues, we're not only talking about potential loss of life
Yeah, yeah.
through suicide, but also loss of life through abuse of drugs and so forth. So
Yeah.
it really, really is important.
Absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate you emphasizing that point. Thank you.
Good evening. It's with pleasure that tonight we have two of our teaching staff who are going to be recommended for tenure. They're what we call off-cycle, so they were hired in a January, February timeframe, and they've worked over the last 3 or 4 years to earn this honor. And I wanted to just highlight a couple of things that are on each one of their tenures, and they're both here tonight, so if you would stand up when I read your stuff. So first one is Laura Hyde. Laura Hyde is a speech-language therapist at the high school, currently, I believe, at High School West. Her tenure recommendation was written by Michelle Mylod. And a couple of highlights for Laura. She develops tools that create a student-teacher bond that goes beyond working on a goal. They open a door of common ground, of genuine interest and kindness that humans seek out. They provide context to ask about or topics to comment or outside of the therapy session. Throughout the recommendation, it talks about Laura's engaging with kids, connecting with kids, all the things that we encourage and expect, and not only the kids, but also with our staff and with the parents. Mrs. Hyde's been a great addition to the speech and language department and the high school special education department at Shenendehowa. She's flexible, dedicated to students, and a great support to her colleagues and families in improving students' language development as they work hard towards post-secondary goals. She's dedicated to promoting engaging and relevant experiences for her students that include an understanding and ownership of language and communication development. She understands the need for communication devices and programming that supports student learning. She is a lifelong learner, and she accesses multiple venues to support her own professional growth. She's highly recommended for tenure, as I said, by Mrs. Michelle Mylod. So Laura Hyde is right there. Okay. I'll make the recommendation now, and then we'll approve it later, but thank you for clapping. All right. Our next person is Jack Marshall. And Jack joined us as part of the music department, and his schools are listed as Carragana, Arenda, Scano, and Tasago. So he's a busy music teacher that we have. His tenure recommendation was written by Mr. Frank Roselli and Mr. Todd Giagni, one of the 4 principals. I heard there was a little bit of arm wrestling as to who was actually going to write the tenure recommendation. The thing I wanted to highlight about Mr. Marshall's was the information that was provided by Mr. Roselli about parent contact that Mr. Marshall had. Some of the emails that he's received over the course of the 4 years that he's been with us from both parents and administrators. You're a fantastic addition to the Shen Music program. Your enthusiasm is infectious in a good way. You make parents feel comfortable and confident that their children are learning from you. Your clear love of music and teaching continues to put in any student's name in one of those 4 buildings to music. So in addition to that, Jack chaperoned and or led, I don't think I have it up here. I want to say, was it 42 concerts? 42 concerts. He was the instructor, the leader for. So thank you. That's Jack Marshall.
Can I have a motion to modify the agenda so we can vote on these 2 tenure recommendations?
Yeah, you can do it.
Mr. Jalalo, Mrs. Hoffman, all in favor to the modification? Okay, so we've heard the tenure recommendations. Any other comments regarding them?
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Okay.
Nice job.
So do I have to do another?
Yes, that motion has.
So motion to vote on this? Can I get another motion? Mrs. Stevenson, Mrs. Hoffman, all in favor? Okay, so we now have 2 new tenured teachers in our school.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard.
Now we can clap.
Very good. It's probably the easiest in the middle.
Yes.
Do the handshakes.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, next up is Future Cities and FLL Robotics Showcase. Mrs. Betzweiser.
My name is Mrs. Betzweiser. I've been doing this since 2003. The Future City Competition is a national program sponsored by Discover E, formerly the National Engineers Week. The mission of the Future City Competition is to provide a fun and exciting educational engineering program to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students that combines a stimulating engineering challenge with hands-on applications to present their vision of a city of the future. This year, the city had to tap into tomorrow. Choose a threat to your city's water supply and design a resilient system to maintain a reliable supply of clean drinking water. And as you can see from the program, we have 3 different groups that will be represented tonight. The first year I did, I had people from all over, and then the general committee said we had to have one from each school. So I am going to ask Mr. Slawinski to present his coda because it's right here.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Slawinski, coach for CODA. This is some of my team. Not everyone could be here. My team chose a city that has its issues with some natural disasters, primarily earthquakes. Okay, so we have Super San Fran taking place in the future. We have Nick, Chris, Sean, and Nick.
Oh, boy.
It's so hard to learn names. Okay. All right, guys, if you want to just say a little bit about the city itself and just explain what you did. Just want the trophy if you want.
Please stand over here, Nick, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Speak,
Which one?
Yep, so just-
Go on.
speak loud into the mic. You don't have to touch it. It's pretty sensitive.
Do we even have a transportation?
Yeah. We're talking about the water transportation.
So, for the water transportation, we figured San Francisco because it's struggling with its water supply. It's not getting enough clean water to it. So we decided that would be our location. So we were going to try and help its water supply. So you can see our water treatment plant, water storage in the pipes. So San Francisco gets a lot of earthquakes. So to counteract that with the pipes, yes, there's the pen. Okay, but to counteract the earthquakes in San Francisco, these pipes are made of graphene, which is a carbon, but graphene is very expensive, so it's more of a steel with it's a steel pipe with graphene joints, so it can bend with the earthquakes instead of cracking and breaking. But how the water's worked is through desalination. It goes through our plant. We take the water from the ocean, because we're right next to the ocean, so that's convenient. So it goes through the pipes. It goes into our water treatment plant through a desalination process, which cleans it and spreads it out to our city.
Very good. Any other comments? You sure?
Who made the windmill?
I built it.
What were different roles? Can you talk about your roles real quick? What role did you play? Ken.
So I focus mainly on the water process for the desalination, and the way desalination works is we take seawater, and then we push it through membranes and highly pressurized tubes, and we do that, and we remove the salt because salt is dissolved into seawater, and it's we don't want to waste energy by boiling it because that's a huge waste of energy. So we just push it through highly pressurized tubes, and so we clean our water.
Is that like reverse osmosis? It is,
Yes.
okay.
I focus more on the design and layout of the city, keeping it more environmentally friendly by adding parks and environmentally friendly buildings and road transportation that was easier to navigate and get around.
What you, Beth?
I just built the boardwalk here, and they just put a design, and I was working with John, and then
Oh, John is not here.
yeah.
Okay. Good.
Good.
Thank you.
I helped with the smaller details, like the pictures on the poster and the ropes along the boardwalk on the bottom.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Good.
Thank
So
you, sir.
just a quick question. What was your biggest challenge in doing this?
Figuring out how to clean our water, because that was the main problem at hand, and how to keep a resilient water storage, basically.
All right. Thank you. Nice job.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Move that way, and we'll put Acadia in here.
Oh, so both things slide, huh?
The city.
Nice job, Ed.
Okay, Andrew, all right, everybody come up.
Yeah, you guys can.
I'm guessing you have an artist in the team?
Okay,
Nice
I
mountain.
need about 5 people over here and 5 people over there. Oh, Dr. Robinson.
Nice catch.
Nice catch.
This is time for a new flagpole.
I guess, yeah.
You want to lean against here? You can lean it against
Have to make sure that's added to the budget.
Okay. Okay, let's start out. Ms. Livingston, you want to come in and introduce yourself?
I am Stacy Livingston. I am the coach for the Acadia team. This is my second year doing it, and of course, Mrs. B is my mentor for all that happens here. So, I'll let the kids talk more about
Cynthia,
our
you want to
city.
come in next since you're right there? And explain what you did.
I mostly worked on the painting of the backdrop, and it's located in New Delhi in India. So.
Nice. Nice work.
I helped with like the posters and getting the pictures. I helped with the backdrop and the buildings.
So my job was to write an essay for our city, and I had to sum up all of its important features, such as like the water filtering system and the geography.
And also, what was your job? You were a presenter.
I was also a presenter. I had to present to a panel of judges about our city's features.
I worked on the backdrop.
I mostly focused on the electrical parts of our city.
So I did most of the city's buildings. They're mainly made out of paper, and we use blue and metal parts to make solar panels. And I also made the school and house. Actually, some other people, such as Varshana, she helped paint the actual smaller houses in the back.
Why were they, what was their shape and why did you make it that way?
So our first type of houses are honeycomb designs. They're shaped like a honeycomb pattern. There's 6 outside hexagons around it, so it looks very like satisfying. And there's a hexagon in the middle as like a way of communicating with other people around the neighborhood.
It's very structurally important.
So I helped Edward with writing the essay. I did some of the research on our process of cleaning the water.
I worked mostly on the city's physical parts, and I helped Andrew with some electrical stuff on the city.
I mostly did SimCity.
I helped Cynthia work on the backdrop, and I did a little bit of the physical city, and yeah.
What are the trophies for? What are they recognized?
So,
Come up and read.
so our first trophy was Best Air Transportation Design. Our transportation were based off of pods. We had two types of pods. One of them were on the ground. They used magnetic waves to like move around. And our second type of transportation were air pods, so they flew around here.
Our second award was for excellence in environmental stewardship.
What does that mean?
We have green we have green on all the buildings, and there was green agriculture on all the buildings.
Do the solar panels contribute to that or no?
Yes.
They do.
The solar panels, we have wind energy, solar energy, and water power. And why don't you show them how the water wheel works? We have a water wheel there, and our transportation moves, if somebody wants to move it. We have one
pretty
vehicle
zippy.
going on top, and one vehicle goes one way, and one vehicle goes the other way.
Does it have snow on top of it?
Okay,
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Really nice job.
If you guys want to leave completely, you can go. You could do your homework. Hint. Or you want to sit down and watch, you can sit down and watch one if you want.
You saw this one out there.
Yes, definitely.
It's not as large.
What attention getter.
Good evening. My name is Mr. Clark. I'm the advisor for the Gowanna team, and this is Mrs. Kennedy, another advisor. We have a larger team, but some kids couldn't make it. One of our team members actually moved from the district, so we're short one team member here. But Ethan Waters is here to talk about our project. Our actual name of our model is Paradiso Nuevo, which is a city that's outside of Salt Lake City. And the problem they try to deal with is shortage of water as people move from rural areas to urban areas. And Ethan can talk about the process of making the model.
Yes, so we made the model out of foam. We dissolved the foam for the design. So this is the Great Salt Lake. We actually used reverse osmosis to purify the water here, but we also used electrolysis to purify the water. It separates it into both hydrogen and oxygen, which stores electricity and purifies the water at the same time. We collected the purified water in water molecules that we could use within the city, but also ship elsewhere. And we had solar panels across the lake. This was helpful to get electricity, but also the Great Salt Lake is only salty because of evaporation, and the solar panels helped reduce evaporation, which helped purify the water in there as well.
Beautiful. So what a name.
Well, we have a team history of having it in a different language. It means new paradise.
And the trophies?
Topic of discussion for
Your
a few
trophies.
weeks.
There are two trophies there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had two trophies. This is Best Public Transportation System. So this is a hyperloop that goes across the whole city for transportation also elsewhere, because Salt Lake City is in a very isolated area. And there's also these pods that transport around the city as a way of public transportation. They're right there. We also had best use of innovation in transportation for our unique design.
Oh, very nice. Nice job.
Good
Looks
presentation.
like a lot of work. Ethan, you might as well stay there.
Round two.
That was the whole thing, that's it?
That's it? Okay.
You wanna
No,
introduce
actually, they're going to do it all.
Okay, so FFL.
Okay, FLO. Or First Lego League. Nice job. At the science bowl? Who's doing the presentation? All you have to do is click on the link for the video.
For the video?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's sort of can't,
okay, so you have a video, huh?
Yeah.
Right, but not yet.
Actually,
Not yet.
I'll let you know when we're ready.
Okay, no problem.
So I'm Bill Waters. I am the head coach of one of Shenendehowa's two First Lego League robotics teams. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. But I'm going to let the kids speak for themselves. But first, I wanted to say to everybody here, thank you for the support of the district and the community. This is truly a team and community event. Shen provides us with so many resources in the form of very expensive Lego robotics, space, hosting a tournament, a district-wide tournament. Dr. Robinson, thank you very much for attending the tournament. Your presence there was well received. Thank you. And I'd also, this is going to be embarrassing to her, but I'd be completely remiss if I didn't call out Naomi Hoffman for her contributions to make this program a success. People think that this is about Legos and robotics, and that's only the smallest slice of what these kids do across the season. Really what they do is they use Legos and robotics as a challenge that is so hard that it's going to drive them to frustration, beyond the brink of frustration, to the point of literal tears in many cases. And the only way for them to work through those problems is to come together as a team, which in a district as wide and diverse as ours is a big thing. We've got kids from 3 middle schools and 3, possibly 4 elementary schools all coming together, meeting each other for the first time in August. And then come December, they're expected to be presenting to these big, scary judges. So they have done so much, and I'm so proud of everything they've done just to get to the point of winning the trophies that they've done this season. So I'm going to hand it over to the kids. Larry.
Speak towards the mic.
Can you say your name, Larry, and your the school you're from?
Hello, I am Larry Yang, a 5th grader from Tasago, and I am here to tell you about FLL. FLL is a worldwide organization that inspires kids to solve STEM-related problems as a team held together with good core values. Each year we are given a theme and 2 challenges. One challenge you have to solve with a robot that you program, and the second you have to solve by it's a problem in our world. This year's theme is City Shaper, and we have to program a Lego robot to solve city-related challenges. And our other challenge is that we have to identify and design a solution for a problem in our community. And while we do all of this, it is important that we demonstrate good core values. We have a video, please enjoy.
Nice job, Larry.
Sweetheart.
explain their projects.
Our challenge was to identify a problem in our community and design a solution to it. Clifton Park has many parks, but lots of them aren't well known, and it's difficult to travel from one to another safely on foot. We talked to community experts like Mr. John Scavo, the town director of planning, and used their feedback to help design our solution. We designed an online interactive map that not only shows where the parks are, but it shows how they could be connected. We used a computer science algorithm, the minimum spanning tree, to compute the connections, and we published it on our website, www.shenendehowa.com.
And how can it be used by local groups?
It could be used by local groups to find where these parks are, and also to find ways to connect them together.
So one of the things specifically is like our running team. How can our running team benefit from it?
A running team can find a park that they can go to, and a way to travel to different parks so they aren't stuck just running in loops. They can get from one place to another without having to run only on roads or in just one small area.
Thank you. Kate? I should have said, you should probably introduce yourself too.
So, this is the Gyromaniacs, and we also had to solve this problem with a public space they're building in our community. And the problem that we came up with was that people who don't have access to cars or don't like to use cars, including pedestrians and cyclists, feel unsafe when using roads, crosswalks, and sidewalks, even if those do exist in Clifton Park. Our town has done lots of improvements and has lots of great policies, but for most of the time, cyclists and pedestrians still don't feel safe going from one place to another. As a part of our solution, we created the CP map.
What is that?
In the Coda, Guana, and Acadia middle schools to ensure that our ideas are passed on to the future, as well as to make sure that students are always engaged in improving our community. As a club, we believe that most roads have little or no accommodation and that have been made for cyclists and pedestrians. So often the option is to use lanes that are meant for motorized vehicles. Under these conditions, it is not surprising that most people, including Shen students and their families, often choose to not walk or ride their bicycles, since accidents involving cyclists and pedestrians often cause serious injuries and can even be fatal. For younger, inexperienced cyclists and pedestrians, the risk level is simply too high. What we hope to accomplish as a club is to reach the 5 E's in our community. The 5 E's are evolution in planning, engineering, enforcement, education, and encouragement. What we plan to do is for encouragement. Encouragement definition is we will create a strong community of biking and walking culture. So what we plan to do for encouragement, we will plan on hosting bike rides and walks around the Shenendehowa campus and town of Clifton Park and Half Moon. We will also partake in outreach and charity events like charity bike rides.
Education is giving the people the ability and skills to ride bikes and informing them on how biking and walking benefits our health and our environment. We will train people to ride safely and learn about traffic rules that apply to bikers, helping people recognize the unsafe road conditions that are presented in Clifton Park, educating some drivers on road safety for bikers and to have respect for pedestrians and cyclists on the roads, and keeping in contact with our town officials and see other more biker-friendly communities as an example to improve.
So for enforcement, that is ensuring safe roads and paths for everyone. We will keep in touch with law enforcement and the school's resource officer for more information on the subject. And we will advocate for better and more efficient pedestrian and bike safety laws.
For engineering, um, engineering is creating safe and useful places to walk and bike. We will advocate for all types of engineering solutions, not just the ones we came up with at our town hall and research and outreach events. Our main engineering solution is road dieting. The road lanes are shrunk and a pathway along the side of the road is created. We will continue working on making this reality in our town. We will create simulations of our solutions to test for road traffic, and we will want to eventually create a network of connected trails, sidewalks, and bike lanes and safer intersections.
For evaluation and planning, we're going to plan to make a bicycling and walking as a safe form of transportation. We will survey students and adults in our school and town. We will start within the school and slowly survey people outside the school within the town. The surveys will ask about their thoughts on safety, whether they would or would not like, even if there were safer road conditions. After collecting the data, club members will analyze it and create a database to store our and we will present our data with the town planners, all of the information in your brochures. Oh.
Change that.
Yeah. Shouldn't we change these?
Okay. So they've actually created a club. Mr. Rodriguez, who I think is in the back, in the green shirt and the shirt waving, he is their coach. He's also the advisor of the club so that they can continue this work, hopefully following it through, because that's the big challenge year over year, is after the season's done, what happens to the idea that they've put forth, they've done all this work for, and so it's carrying it forward. And both teams, I believe, so you guys have a presentation tomorrow with the town, and the robotic renovators also have a presentation at a town board meeting. The plan is to put their website live on the town's website. So, I mean, their solution live, a link on the town's website. This is a program, as you can see, it takes a lot of work. The coaches, Bill Waters, he's done a lion's share of the organizing, getting the video, getting the kids ready for tonight. But we have a whole team of coaches, Rogerio Rodriguez, Jeff Shine, Alex Zhang. They were the coaches for the Gyromaniacs, for the Robotic Renovators, Bill Waters, Mingli Yang, and I also helped coach that team. It's been a great season. They're not done. They're going to keep moving forward. They're going to pay it forward by teaching classes in school, teaching kids how to program robots, and hopefully the teams will get back together next year and continue to do great things.
Thank you all.
Aiden.
Come on. And the other clarification is Team 20 was referred to many times.
Thank you.
That's actually our high school robotics team.
You want help? No, I'm just going to put them, especially he's going to put them to the side over here. Just want to, so come to grab them with me.
Oh, thank you, Deanna.
I think this one right here. Oh, no, this is the robotics here. This is the Lego.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Teresa. Oh.
Okay, things settled down. Let's go to claims audit reports.
Exciting stuff.
If there are any questions, if not, we'll just keep going.
Yep. No? Any questions on the audit report?
Looks great, Kathy.
Okay. Awesome. Then let's go to mid-year projection and 3-year financial forecast.
So as Mrs. Chase comes forward, just to put this in context, the board was provided with what we call an executive summary, so we won't necessarily go into a lot of details. This process is a part of our budget development process where the mid-year projection is we're making certain assumptions that, based upon what has happened so far, what does it look like at the end of the year? So give us some flavor of financially where we expect to end the year, and subsequently, as we develop the next budget, how does it impact the next budget? The 3-year forecast is an exercise that we do, again, making a lot of assumptions about various cost units and saying, okay, what does, if we estimate end the year at a certain point in June, and we keep those assumptions running for the next 3 years, what the next 3 years look like? And again, it's an indication for us as a system to see what type of patterns that we're seeing in the path that we can project the future to be. It's not a budget. It certainly gives us an indication of that. So we do both of these exercises, again, to assess our fiscal health as a system, and then to try to if you want to say, draw the path as we go through the budget process as well. So we won't necessarily go through all the details of this, just highlight some of the key areas, just so the board can have a flavor. And as I hear Mrs. Chase coughing, I have a feeling I might be talking a lot more tonight than I anticipated, but it's okay. So this may feel somewhat brief, but certainly the board has had this for a while now and looked at it. And so if there are questions you have, we could go through those as well. Mrs. Chase?
Thank you. So just to kind of review, we're starting with our adopted budget that was approved by the voters. The next column is the carryover encumbrances and budget adjustments, which would be transfers to and from different codes. Then we have our adjusted budget, and the far right column is our projected expenses, and the difference is the mid-year adjustment that you'll see there. You'll see that it's a little tighter this year perhaps than where we typically are at this point. And one of the reasons, particularly with instructional salaries, is that we had to estimate a 2-year contract settlement, because as of June 30th, or as we were doing the budget this last year, we had not yet settled the contract. So compounded 2 years, that's a lot of estimating on a large expense item, as you can see. Instructional salaries, we had 11 retirements, 14 resignations, and 48 leaves of absence so far. So you'll see that we have about $540,000 savings there. Administrative salaries, we had 2 resignations and 2 small leaves of absence this year. For non-instructional salaries, we had 19 retirements, 27 resignations, and 101 leaves of absence so far this year. So based on the salaries, you'll see the benefits follow accordingly. Looking at some of the other items, we're pretty much going to fully expend most of our general areas. Contractual expense, I will mention, in particular, we're seeing a large uptick in special education costs for private placement students. So that was perhaps a little more fully expended for this projection than otherwise we would see. Textbook and library, we're going to fully maximize our aid there. BOCES, fully maximizing our aid there and probably fully expend as well. Supplies, again, almost fully expended when you see the budget line item of $3.7 million. And benefits, we expect to see about a $2 million savings. Roughly half of that is health insurance. The other half include the 2 retirement systems, Social Security, and some of the other smaller benefit areas. So we're projecting at this point that we will expend about a little over 98% of our budget. And it's a little tighter than we typically would be at this point in time for the reasons that we talked about.
Last year, we went 97.4, just to give you some context. So when we say a little tighter, 97%, now we're at 98, so it's right on point.
Excuse me. Revenue, we're actually realizing a little over 100% in our revenue. Right now, our real property taxes with STAR and interest, we're expecting to be right on target there. Federal revenue, a little shortfall based on Medicaid. State aid, a little overage because our BOCES aid was higher than expected by about $600,000. Building aid, a little less by about $300,000. The other items, pretty much right on target. I'm happy to say interest is higher this year than what we budgeted. I don't usually get to say that. And as I mentioned, our total projected is a little over 100%.
So just for the board's purposes, school districts are very restricted in terms of what we could invest in. It's your typical savings account and CDs, and neither one of those things have any returns. So I say that because some people hear about the market, this and this. We don't invest in the market. It's pretty much savings accounts and CDs, so very, very minimal return on interest income.
So looking at our fund balance calculation, we roll forward from the end of last year, which is about 6.9 million. And as we just projected, year-end revenue at 178 million, expenditures 175 million. So our excess revenue over expenditure is about 3.6 million. And adding that to our beginning balance gives us total funds of fund balance to play with, so to speak, at 10.5 million. Typically, we replenish our reserve for retirement. We typically replenish our reserve for employee benefits, and we reappropriate 1.5 million each year as well.
So Kathy, let me just go back one quick step, because the board's going to hear about this again. When we get into the budget itself, you're going to hear about the employee retirement system rate increases. Next year, 14.3%. And so that's why this reserve comes into play, because what we can't do is say we're going to cut programs for kids because we need to address the increase in retirement costs. And so that's why the reserve, ERS is 14.3%. So that's why this comes into place in terms of, again, the reserves in place to offset those type things. Similarly, the teacher retirement reserve, which went into place last year, is anticipated going to 9.5%. So one of the things I always say, we can't tell kids that, sorry kid, we can't offer a program to because we pay retirement benefits. We have to plan for those things. And so this is part of our planning process with our reserve accounts. And so that's why the reserves become such a vital part of our program provisions as a system.
So just ran through those numbers as one potential scenario that we could see at the end of the year, which would bring us to 7.1 million and 3.95% in our fund balance, which is within the 4% allowance that the state allows. Running that through next year, the following year, just to see where we would be, carrying forward that 7.1 million. Year-end estimates projecting 100% revenue and 99% expenditure. That's actually based on our 3-year forecast that you'll see in a minute. Brings us to excess revenue over expenditures of 1.8 million, added to our beginning balance again, which brings us to 8.9 million. And again, just kind of ran through the typical contributions that we make between employee benefits, the retirement, and the 1.5 for reappropriation, brings us to about $6 million or 3.21%. So the numbers can play out significantly different just based on the revenue and
So
expenses.
it's unfortunate this is blocking this last bottom one here.
I know, you can't see the best part.
So, but I want to share a contrast with the board. So again, the reason why we do these, what we call simulations, so to speak, is so if we do all the things that, if all the things that we're planning to do transpire the way they do for this year, we'll be around $7 million fund balance to flow in. And then we just do the hypothetical, let's roll it another year. The fund balance as the budget gets tighter is now $6 million. And so the piece that we always have to watch is, okay, that's why we do the simulations out. Because if we see the trend doing this, we need to figure out how do we stop this trend and start doing the flatline approach with the trend. And so there will become decision points that we have to make in terms of what contributions we make into reserves, how do we actually structure the budget itself, because what we can't afford to say is find ourselves hitting the cliff and didn't know was coming. There's no excuse for that. And so that's the reason why these exercises may seem like here, and again, I always point out that I'm going to run through this for 10, 15 minutes tonight, but this is hundreds and hundreds of hours of analyzing thousands of data points. And to make all this stuff make simple sense to John Q, who's looking at that, knowing that, okay, I see what the future looks like. And so that's why, again, we do the backdrop. A lot of stuff, Kathy and her staff spend hundreds of hours analyzing various numbers in different categories, different ways to kind of bring this very simplified format to the board and to the public, and also for us to have a sense of what does the future hold for us.
So showing kind of the summary of what the reserves would look like based on the scenario we just spoke about. It shows our beginning balances from June of last year, the reappropriations that we did for both the retirement, ERS reserve, and employee benefit, and also replenishing both of those as well as an additional contribution to TRS. And you can see where those reserves end up projected for this next year. And then moving on to the 3-year forecast, we start with our projected mid-year estimate that we just calculated in the prior slides. We made several assumptions moving forward for the next 3 years. Salaries and wages, we look at the contracts, so whatever percentages are settled upon, or if they're not settled upon, we look at our trends, and we apply those percentages to come out with our typical increases, if you will. Fringe benefits, health insurance can go haywire pretty quickly. I think we estimated about 8% increase in the health insurance. The others benefits are a formula based on salary. So you can see we increase about $10 million over the 3-year course for that. Supplies, materials, equipment, the other contractual increases, I estimated about 2%. BOCES is averaging more around 3%. Utilities, I estimated 5% and started us back where our budget is because that is fairly volatile. And the one thing that really drives numbers for the bottom line is looking at our debt service, because those numbers are dropping as we look at the next 3 years. Because next year we're dropping from 10 million to 9.5 million, then to 9.1, and then to 7.8 million, which, as we spoke about at the last board meeting, we're contemplating another referendum coming up, and you can see there's some flexibility in our debt service. We want to keep that fairly stable. We've got some room there to grow. So looking at the next 3 years based on those assumptions only, you can see next year's budget would increase by 2.28%, the following year 3.98, and 3.28 the following year. Now, that's just running formulas without really managing any of those costs otherwise. Certainly the tax cap is going to play into what those numbers will be, as well as retirement system costs, which we don't control, health insurance, which we try to control, but somewhat out of control, and any other changes that SED or the state decides to throw upon us.
So just one color commentating note. So when we get to this is always the piece that I'm anxious to wait to see what this is going to look like. So if instead of 2.8, this was 12.8 and 13.9 and 13.2, I would say we have a problem, a major problem, because we will be projecting double-digit budget increases, which mean also double-digit tax increases, which neither one of those things will fly very well, which means major reductions in budget. So when we look at this, and based upon some assumptions, some conservative, some with some flexibility, we're still very much in that ballpark of what we think is a reasonable, passable budget. That's a good sign for us as a system. And so that's important, because when we think about other things that could impact, be it revenue on the state side, or be it some cost structures, I mean, right now the state is dealing with issues related to Medicaid costs and all those kind of things. Those are big cost drivers that we also feel. When we look at that, we say, okay, do we have enough to weather potentially some of those big storms, so to speak? The answer is yeah, but we don't want a whole bunch of those big storms back to back as we look at it. So again, for the purpose of the board sitting here and we go into the budget process, we're not going into the budget process of like, oh my God, we got to have plans in place to make reductions in budget cut program services. But on the same note, we're not going to the budget process saying, woohoo, we're going to just go and do anything we want to do. Neither. We're going to the budget process in a very sensible way, saying that, yeah, we can preserve the quality programs that we've had this past year, and we have some opportunity for some enhancements. And that's always the place we want to be. Preserve the good things that we're doing and have an opportunity for enhancements. So this gives us that first glimpse of that and then we start dissecting the budget to really, really then tighten all these numbers up, and then we'll go through the projections and move forward again the next cycle, the next year, and we always have a look out 3 years out. So I'll stop there in case there are questions, comments the board may have.
Mr. Delala?
Couple of comments. We look at other districts, and sometimes they're victims of circumstances beyond their control. They're losing population, their tax base is shrinking. They have disproportionate amounts of expense because of great needs with their students and so forth. We're fortunate that we don't have those things. But the reason that we're in the position that we are in is not just because we have a better situation in the community, but because of you two. I mean, you said, we can't do this. We can't say, sorry, kids, we can't have this. That's something that has been accomplished through your skill and your diligence. And we're really, really fortunate. I hope that the people of this community fully appreciate what you've been able to do. We just don't sit on things and say, oh, that's good enough. We're always looking to get better. But at the same time, we're really good stewards of what the community has to offer. I mean, use the example of the debt service. Some districts, sounds like a great idea, paid off their debt, and all of a sudden next year they don't get the money from aid. Yeah. So it's not just a question of keeping your debt service relatively flat so that you're not increasing the amount of service that you have to pass on in taxes to your residents, but also a matter of preserving your income, which is coming from the state to reimburse you. And if you don't plan that ahead, you wind up on the short end of the stick. Yeah. So, I mean,
thank you.
There aren't enough kudos to offer.
Yeah, kudos to Kathy and her team. They make me look good, I guess. So thank you. And just for clarification, we use the word debt service. So analogy that it's our mortgage payment. Yeah. So we always have a $10 million mortgage payment, right? And so when we bring new capital construction, our goal is to keep it flat or have it a little bit lower. So as we pay off one thing, we add something else, and not having two new debt at the same time, and then your exposure goes up, and then we're taking away from something to pay for that exposure. So appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mr. Delalo. So we're excited about going to the budget process. Carmen, you want to come forward? Can't see the bottom. Everybody's got the cough. So in the coming months, we'll be getting more into the budget process, and you'll be sharing more about that as we see. But this is, again, a good mental piece for the board. For us, it's where we start doing a background analysis for a lot of the things that we present to the board and to the public. Just a quick overview. We won't necessarily go into details so much, but one of the things that we've been working on is the school calendar. And this is the one that every parent out there wants to know. It's not official yet. It's not adopted by the board, so don't go and make vacation plans based upon what you hear from me or see tonight. But Mrs. Carmen has been the person leading this whole piece. Next year's calendar, we know is going to be a tight calendar. It's going to be 184 days, which is because Labor Day is so late. This year, Labor Day is a lot later. So we're looking to start school on Superintendent's Conference on the 7th. Students come back on the 8th. I'm sorry, the 8th, and students come back on the 9th. What we've referred to as Pi Day, that Wednesday before Thanksgiving, will not be there because the 184-day calendar is a very tight calendar. So to the chagrin of some, but it's one of those things that happen and happen from year to year. So this is what we're looking to do right now. The one piece that we're still, and I'm having some conversation with my colleagues, November 3rd, November 3rd is the national elections. And with the new law that talks about people having time off to vote and all those kind of things, creates a lot of complications. So anytime of a national election, it's always more complicated. So we're contemplating the possibility of using that day a little bit differently, potentially another superintendent's conference day. But it needs to be a more coordinated effort with schools around the region, in terms of if we're going to do it, because it's a ripple effect. If everyone else is doing it, we're not the only one, then we can't send kids to BOCES, we can't send kids to this, and all of a sudden it creates a lot more other complications within our system. So we're having some conversations surrounding that. So it's not on the calendar right now, but I just want to put an asterisk beside that. So if at some point you see that change, you have some backdrop of when it's changed. So our goal is to fine tune some things and have this presented to the board. The next business meeting for approval. And clearly, people start planning their vacations. I'm not even going to say when the vacations are because I don't want anyone to say they heard it from me. And when they book their tickets and something changed. But we try to have consistency around the region in terms of Christmas, February break, spring break, as we move forward.
I won't travel.
Mr. Gillotto.
Are all the neighboring DSs from the
Yes.
BOCES playing nice this year?
Yes, a year ago, we had a conflict, was it April break? Had 2 different weeks. Saratoga had 1 week, we had another week, which was crazy because we have people working across the way, and so everybody's playing nice, and we all have the Saratoga County, not Saratoga School District. So we all playing nice, and we're on the same place. So,
Was last year?
2 years ago, I think it
It was
was.
2 years ago,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's just a quick overview, just the board kind of know that's to come. So Mrs. Corman, you want to?
So tonight we have policies that went to policy review in January, and they're being put forth tonight for first reading. Most of them, as Mrs. Hoffman had said, are instructional policies that we're in the process of reviewing, actually all of them. But this is a good amount of them to start off. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to consent items, and we'll start off with the treasurer's report. Can I have a motion on this? Mrs. Hoffman and Mrs. Stevenson. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, and let's take a look at the minutes. Hopefully, I don't know if we have a quorum for this, but let's try it. January 14th.
I think we were all here.
Were we all here for the?
Probably wasn't.
Take a look at the
Yeah, we gotta look at who's
minutes.
So Hoffman.
Oh, yes, just Christina.
Okay.
Stevenson,
So 4 of us
So
are
we're all
here.
here, yeah.
Okay, can I have a motion on this one?
And the
Mrs. Hoffman,
28th.
second, Mrs. Stevenson. Any questions? All in favor? The January 14th minutes?
we can do
Okay,
that.
let's look at January 28th.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So motion on this one, January 28th minutes, Mrs. Stevenson, second, Mrs. Hoffman. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay. So consent items taken care of. Let's go to action items. So first one, acceptance of the annual fire inspection. Can I get a motion on this one? Mrs. Stevenson, second, Mrs. Hoffman. Any comments, questions?
I was just impressed by, even with the findings that they had, that all have been addressed. So nice, really nice work.
Okay, anything else? If not, all in favor? Approval of internal control report and corrective action plan dash risk assessments. Can I get a motion on this one? Mr. Delalo, Mrs. Hoffman, second. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? And then we have 3 bids consolidated for transportation, copy paper, and transportation fluids. Can I get a motion on this one? Mrs. Stevenson first, second, Mr. Delalo. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? And we have some change orders through Tri-Valley. Can I get a motion on this one? Mrs. Stevenson, second, Mrs. Hoffman. Any questions? All in favor? Let's combine 5 and 6 and 7. 5, 6, and 7 contracted services for both special education, CMI, our cleaning instructors, and professional development with Dr. Maren Bloom. Any comments? First one, motion on these 5, 6, and 7? To take to the table, Mr. Delalo, second, Mrs. Hoffman. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? And then number 8, disposal of non-public textbooks dash BOCES. Can I get a motion on this one? Mr. Delalo, second. Mrs. Stevenson, any comments, questions? If
I
not,
was just surprised that we have to motion this for something like this.
Yeah, it's a requirement.
You don't give them back? I mean, it's just a process that we dispose of them? Okay, all right, just curious.
all right. Anything else? All in favor on number 8? Okay, let's go to 9, scholarships and local grant donations. Can I get a motion on this one? Mrs. Hoffman, second, Mrs. Stevenson, any comments, questions?
With appreciation.
With appreciation, okay. All in favor? Okay, with appreciation. And number 10, this one is a nomination resolution for Mrs. Hoffman to assume the role of BOCES board member. Mr. Delalo, motion on this one?
Yes. In favor? Yeah, comment.
Actually, can I vote on
Okay,
that?
we got a first motion, second motion, Mrs. Stevenson, okay, comments, questions, Mr. DeLallo?
Comment. I think Mrs. Hoffman's going to be a fine board member for BOCES, particularly given not only her commitment to kids, but we saw probably one of the most inspiring presentations that I've seen in years here with the kids and what they did. Most people would look at that and they say, really, they did that? Not only did they take a very difficult problem, work through it, use it as a basis for advancing their knowledge and so forth, but they didn't just stop when they came up with the solution. Then they went out and they actually promoted it and made it available. And it's the kind of thing I hope that, schools do as a more general thing. But it's really inspiring in the sense that you've got a young group of kids who have actually done something to shape their world around them going forward. And that's what we want them to be able to do. And I think that's exactly the sort of thing that needs to happen in the career and technical program, which I think you will be able to bring forth, Tech Valley High School. And because there are so many projects that are going on to address deficiencies and inadequacies in facilities, involving a lot of financial stuff, some pretty creative stuff. I think that Mrs. Hoffman's background in finance and audit and so forth will be invaluable. So I'm glad that she's going to
Thank
be
you.
willing to go forward.
Thank you
on
for
this.
saying that. I appreciate it.
Any other comments? I'd like to add with gratitude both to you, Mrs. Hoffman, and for you, Mr. DeLallo, for the number of years you've served with that group. You've set ourselves up for continued success based on what you've done over there. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Can I vote for this?
Yes.
Yes.
I can, okay.
Okay.
If you're not, it won't happen.
I know.
Number 10 passes unanimously, so let's move over to special education. And Mrs. Mylod, go ahead, please.
Good evening. I have the recommendations from the committees on preschool and school-age special education.
Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Stevenson, Mrs. Hoffman, second. Any other comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay, let's go to staffing recommendations minus tenure, which we already passed. Go ahead, Mrs. Bush.
Yes, so tonight, as part of the staffing, we have 2 retirements that I'd like to acknowledge, and one of the folks is here. So
Okay.
the first one is Lugina Montesano, and she's been a cook for 26 years in food service. She's not here tonight. But the second person is Joe Mulvaney. Joe is here. Joe, would you stand up? He has been a cleaner in the district for 32 years,
Wow.
29 and a half at Gowanna. And so I went to find him to give him a few minutes so that we could recognize him
All right.
Awesome.
as he's retiring.
Congratulations, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your,
Can I get a
I've
motion?
seen you.
Oh, motion.
Sorry.
Motion, Mrs. Hoffman, second, Mrs. Stevenson. Any questions? Not, all in favor? All right, motion passes. Do you want to bring them up for a quick?
Yes,
handshake?
please.
31 years.
Hey, man.
I know.
Thank you, buddy. You want to shake the hand?
Great job. Thank you. Don't walk
Thank you
around
so
again.
much for everything.
Thank you.
I've seen you a lot, all the time.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Hoffman on the other side.
We're going to miss you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, if I could paraphrase a story, it comes from a hospital, but nonetheless, it said, if you had to ask a person who would be missed the most in the short term in any given situation, but in the schoolroom or school, if the building principal was gone for 2 or 3 days, or in the school, just at the school level, the superintendent was gone 2 or 3 days, will we miss him? Well, yeah. But if a custodian is gone for 2 or 3 days, oh boy. So they are invaluable.
Yeah, indeed.
All right, let's go to policy procedures, second reading, Mrs. Garland.
Yes, so tonight we have being presented for second reading our policies that went forth to policy review in December. And one of the things that I do want to make note tonight is that policy 5413, we did bring forward for first reading, but we did not have the regulation attached as we were trying to format the regulation because it's 146 pages long. And that's not typical for us as a district to have a regulation that long. However, it's a federal document that we are using that Kathy has for her office that the Association of School Business Officials have put out. So that's the regulation that's new in there for your informational purposes.
Any questions on this? If not, can I get a motion? Mrs. Stevenson first, Mrs. Hoffman second. All in favor? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to remaining public comments. Anybody in the public who would like to follow up with comments? If not, policy review. This is something we maintain on our website, the next schedule. And simply, next public meeting, first readings will go for second readings. So first readings, this is the time people can make comments. If you recall from our meeting a month ago, we had a speaker bring forward some things. Those are inserted into the first readings. So if someone wants to sort of connect the dots and come to some conclusion as to what is being presented, they certainly can. This is all in public, and everybody can simply use what's available to them that way. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Can I have a comment first?
Sorry, go ahead. One final comment?
Just really quick tonight, I saved my comments, and it's just the one committee meeting, the one committee that I'm talking about is the Shenendehowa Education Foundation. Again, I will continue to talk about this until we have our gala, which is April 25th at the Hilton Garden Inn. We have it's a Mardi Gras theme this year, changing up a few things. We continue to look for people that are interested in serving on the board. We're looking, if alumni are always welcome as we can continue to push that. So if anybody knows of anybody that may be interested in sitting on the foundation, please let us know. So yeah, I'm going to continue to talk about that, and as we vet out the ideas that are coming forth and hopefully unveil that night, what we're going to stand behind and what the sponsorships are going forward and toward, and what as a foundation we are going to stand behind in the coming years. So more on that to come.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And then really quickly,
Go ahead, please.
something that I just remembered. Whoa. As long as I don't tip over the microphone. I spoke with a handful of students just about things that they wanted to get behind or just improvements that they wanted to see. And so I'm going to, talk to a lot more people and things like that to see if I can get something going, because I know a lot of people have mentioned things about like mental health and things like that in the schools. So I just wanted to mention that, and I'm going to start something there.
Good. Thank you. All right. Anything else? If not, can I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Hoffman, second. Mrs. Stevenson, all in favor? Okay. Meeting adjourned.